Yeah, we're live. 2 hours later, we're a little bit late. That's okay. Sometimes the weekends are good. Tonight, I want to talk about the thumbnail that I have up is a divided turbo. And more than just that, first of all, we got to take a couple steps back and look at it and go, that's a T6. We need to talk about that. For the single turbo setup that I normally run for these LS motors, I have two factory exhaust manifolds feeding this Y pipe that Jason over at JT Fab did. And it ends with the two 2.5-inch tubes merging together in a 3-inch V band. And then what I do, you could see one of the adapters there. It goes from a 3-inch. In this case, it goes from a 3-inch, and then we step it up to a T6 flange. It also, there's one that goes to a T4 flange. There's one that goes to a T3 flange. Although I don't remember using that other than maybe on a 3076 or something fairly small. So we don't run a lot of T3s as single turbos for something like maybe on a 4.8, but not a lot of the stuff for the LS. For twins, I wouldn't have a problem doing that. In fact, I might be doing that coming up, which would be cool. But most common thing, T4, there are some T6 turbos that we've run. For instance, the one that I'm showing there is probably the Summit turbo, the S475. And that for that particular turbo, that S475 was the Borg Warner or a Borg Warner copy, a version of that. That T6 flange for the hot side is very, very common. In fact, it's probably the most common one. We had to order special housing for a T4 so that we could run that. And I have some T4s that we use from the guys at LJMS and Brian Tooley Racing. Shout out to those guys, as well as the guys from AFR and SCAD and Vortec and Race Tech and Richard Holdener Performance. But the T6 is more common, but we had to get the other ones, the kind of special order of the T4s for the S475s that we had, because we were running those as twins on the Big Bang motor. So we had to get those. And so they were unusual. And quite honestly, as far as for T6 stuff, I just, unless you have a really big motor, I just wouldn't, especially in an S475 size, I just wouldn't do it. I would rather get a T4 version of something. Maybe I would do it on a 408 or something, but if I was doing that and I was doing a T6 would be more common on a way bigger turbo. I think that S475 is kind of entry level for the size of the turbo relative to it being a T6. So I just don't, that's just not that, if you're doing an 88, okay, I could see that. But now that we've gone off on this tangent, and I'm excited because we got turbos coming up this week. So we'll have turbos for sale, not S475s. But on the T6 flange, though, if you take a close look at both the T6 housing that's on that particular turbo, and then also on the adapter that we made, what we did was when we welded that T6 flange to it, it's a divided flange. We didn't do that on purpose. That happened to be the T6 that I had at the time when we were making this adapter, and said, look, I just need a T6. I need a 3-inch V band to T6 adapter, and we need to have that. So just weld that up. And I wasn't doing the welding this time. I think Jason also did this one. So we welded that one up, and it worked fine, but it has a divided housing or a divided flange. And then that T6 that we ran, the Summit Racing one, has a divided housing also. So the first question is, in fact, this could be our poll. We could just get it, just jump right in, just go right at it. I know there's got to be at least one mistake there. Does it matter that the T6 flange is divided when running a divided exhaust housing? All that is right. I can't believe that. So we'll start our poll with that. So the question is, you can see the flange that we made has a divider, basically just a bar going across. If anything, maybe it strengthens that flange and stops it from moving around. So maybe there's a plus there. But does it matter that that's divided? Like, would it change anything if that was just open? Because a lot of the flanges that we have, for a T6 flange are just open and they're not divided. does that matter whether or not that flange is divided or not? The housing is divided. Does it matter? So we'll talk about, to answer this question, because obviously if I wouldn't be talking about this if we didn't have the answer to it, we need to look at a couple of scenarios. One, in the scenario that we have right now, because there's another scenario, actually a couple of other scenarios. So if we have this flange and then we have an open housing and we have a divider in the adapter, is that going to do anything? Well, you would think that it might hurt flow a little bit, right? Because we have an opening going into the exhaust housing, and then we have a divider going across on the flange. Is that going to hurt flow? Like if we had that in a carburetor or a throttle body, people would lose their mind. We kind of have that in a throttle body. If it opens and pivots in the center, and then we have the blade there, we kind of have that. So people know that if we don't have that, if we had a slide valve or something like that, or a barrel valve where we didn't have anything in the middle of a throttle body, it would flow better. Same thing on this exhaust side. If we didn't have that divider, it would flow better. So in that scenario, I don't think we should have a divider in the adapter because we don't have one in the exhaust housing. So we'll strike one against that. Now the question is, should we have one in this case? So we have a divided housing, and now we have a divided flange. So you think that those go together. But honestly, it doesn't make any difference, because even if our adapter was open and it hits that divider, it's the same thing. Now, maybe if you wanted to, you could take that divided housing. Honestly, I would just run an open housing. But if you take that divided housing and then you like knife edge the leading edge of that thing, and so that the air flows not against a flat, it's not very thick, but a flat section of that flange and a knife edge, and that would flow better, and you could get better exhaust into there and maybe more response or more ultimate flow or whatever. It'd be better. So somehow you could argue that it would be better. So you could do that. But in that case, I would argue that the divided flange doesn't make any difference because it's not doing anything. And the reason it's not doing anything is really our third situation. Our third situation is, if you take a look at this adapter, our 2.5 inch, the sections of exhaust leading from each side of the engine, from each side of this V8 engine, merged together in a single open plenum, as you were 3-inch V-band. And then we're continuing that openness from 3-inch up to this T6. There's nothing divided about it there. So if we had this divided all the way, where these tubes merged together and one went to one hole of the divided flange and one went specifically to the other hole, and that they were separate but equal, and so each side was feeding part of the one side of this divided turbo, then I would say, yeah, we want to keep them separate, and that way we could weld them together and they would all be, like I said, separate but equal there. And one side would go to one side and one side would go to the other side. Then it would be a true divided like turbo system or setup on the exhaust, because half would be going to half and half would be going to the other half. But we're not doing that. and then you could ask yourself, well, would one of those be better than the other? Would one of them with 4 pulses from one side of the engine be better than just all merged together? Are the basically the time delay between each pulse, is it better with a V8 for them all to be going in there equally? You guys, you can argue about that a lot, and rather than getting the two sides together, does one have better response? Does one have more ultimate flow? We could get into all that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that having these two tubes merge the way that we do in the Y pipe into this 3-inch V band, and that's open, and then into our adapter, which is open, and then having a divider there, it really does nothing. It was happenstance. It was just because we happen to have that divided like flange when we welded it together, and it doesn't mean anything. And we weren't going to ever join these two together and have it be a true divided deal, because then that would be a dedicated piece, and we don't do it. We could, I guess, make a divided adapter where the two things merge together, and then we would get equal pulsing into each divided section, because you could do it this other way, rather than having it all come from one side and all come from the other side and having them always be separate. If they came together into a common plenum, basically, and then we had a divider, and then they went up as a divider, and they kept it divided going into the housing, would that change anything? It's just all kinds of things. And these are all the comments that I get on stuff. Well, what if you did this? What if you did this? What if you did this? All of that's good stuff. And we don't know exactly unless we test it. And maybe a really sharp guy would know the answer to that off the top of his head. I would only accept that if the guy had tested it. I wouldn't accept his theoretical, no matter how smart he was. I wouldn't test his theoretical explanation. I would want to see data for him to show me what happened. Because I think part of the problem with something like that is I think that with a lot of these things, when we're looking at not a very big change, and with a turbo motor, especially something that's making power, it's hard just to get the thing to be repeatable so that you can find, did it spool up 100 RPM better? We're not going to find that out on the engine dyno, obviously. We have to find that out somewhere else, the chassis dyno or the street or whatever. So we would have to talk about that and testing it in a different manner than we normally do on the engine dyno. But, those are all discussions. What I wanted to know from you guys tonight is I want you guys to throw out lists of things that you want to see tested. Like, for instance, we got to finish the 3800 Big Bang. We got to do the Honda. I got to finish the Honda Big Bang. We want to see, I want to see the 78 millimeter throttle body on the adapter run on the Trailblazer SS to see if that does anything. We got a lot of stuff. I want to do a draw through carbureted turbo setup. There are a lot of things that I want to see tested, and we want to try to get as much of that stuff going so I can make a list of things and then go, okay, when I go down, here's I could get together this list of 10 things, and I think I get this done if I prepped it all right, and then it could just go fast and get it done. So let me know if there's things that you guys want to see. Not, hey, Richard, can you test every cylinder head in the world? Not stuff like that. Just stuff that's stuff that's realistic that we can get done. Like the throttle body test thing is good because that's fairly easy. That's just bolt on a plate and put it on another throttle body and get the motor up to the same exact temperature and all that and make it run and see and kind of see what it does. Those kinds of things are fairly simple, but can you test Frankenstein heads? I don't have anything to run a head like that on, so I can't. I wouldn't really do them justice. Okay, let's see what you guys got going on. Eric, untrue. Jordan, Charlie Brown. Divided versus undivided. Yeah, does it matter? I don't know. I haven't tested a true divided setup. T6 is like power generator stuff. Yeah, I think that the turbo that Mike Davis has on his 8.1 is a T6, and so I think that is T6 good for a single. It can be if you're trying to make lots of power, but like I said, I would balance out what size turbo I was having and the kind of power that I wanted before I thought that I needed a T6. Got a set of 243 heads today for $50. Nice. But one head has a valve cover bolt stripped. That's easy to fix. Has anyone run into this thinking helicoil? Yeah, that should be easy to fix. A valve cover bolt's nothing. You just fix that. And then what I would do is I would put a stud in it. And so that you're not constantly taking something in and out of there. So the stud will just stay in there. Just Loctite the stud in there. In fact, we like having you can't, damn it. You can't do that on an LS. Never mind. I'm thinking small block forward. You can't do that. So no, just scratch that. S480 LQ4 truck plus cam. Now I'm leaning if we are divided or not flange. I don't think you need to worry about that. Everything matters. We're technical. Hello, everyone. Didn't get live notice, but I made it. Danny's in the house. Richard, what would you say is more user-friendly for beginners, a Haltech or Holley Dominator? I haven't played with the Haltech yet. The guys at Westech have, and said it was easy to do, but I have no experience with it yet. That's another thing that's on the list of things that I'm going to run when I go down next time. We're going to run that on the LS. When is an electric water pump justified to use? Definitely on the engine dyno. We like it. I wouldn't use it on the street. Used to be that having twin scroll setup helps with spool up, I believe, because of exhaust gas speed, but does not affect top end power. Yeah, I think that generalized statement is not going to be 100% accurate. So divided does not make a difference. So whatever fits the budget better. No, well, this is all before probably I was having this discussion on everything. Mine is true divided all the way back to the heads. Not sure if it helps. Just the way I built it. Running a divided air. Oh, S475. Okay. So the divided turbos are called twin scroll turbos. Yes. On exhaust, I don't see it matters, but on Super Victor intake with elbows, it helps so runners don't run lean. You're talking about the divider in the throttle body? Is that what you're talking about? Any things are more sensitive because you're not encouraging them. Let's see. Not forcing it. Could you inject some kind of fuel straight into the turbo exhaust housing? Well, why do you want it to go into the turbo exhaust housing? And that has been done to help spool up on road race cars and on rally cars. 462 valve Big Bang. Okay, yep. So we're into the area where we're. So let's see. That's a GT40X. Okay, here we go. I'm writing them all down. On the same turbo, check exhaust size differences. So you want AR changes? We are going to do that. And we're also going to do V-band versus T4. Since you can't do everything, can you do every other cylinder or every third? Since we can't do what? Is there any other time to use an electric water pump than on a dyno, a streetcar? No, I wouldn't do it on a streetcar. I certainly wouldn't do it on a truck that's loaded a lot. Divided turbos or more. I wouldn't. It would be good if you were. And the reason that I was going to put one on my truck is we were going to try to do it for fuel mileage, and for a steady state cruise at 2,000 RPM, it would work good, but not loaded going up a grade or anything. I just don't think there's enough flow rate for the electric pumps. Divided turbos are more suited for 4 cylinders. By 8 cylinders, they're mostly useless. Looking forward to you testing various head and alphabet cam combos. Okay, that's right. 302 cams. But twin scroll V8s are benefit. So, well, what he just said was that the divided housing wasn't benefiting. Can you do small block Ford compound turbo setup? No, we won't do that. I think we can break a small block Ford without doing compounds. Think of changing from my low buck truck to a sloppy stage 3, 6,500 pound car, 6 liter S475. Why would you want to do that? I think that's a terrible idea. The low buck truck, we've already made 1,000 horsepower with it. So you can max out that S475 very easily with that turbo. And it would be way more responsive than a sloppy stage 3. Although 3,400 stall is pretty far up there. Larry, in the elbow, you think that the divider in the elbow does something? I'm assuming that you're talking about on a single plane manifold, but it's all blowing into a common plenum. What happens in the common plenum? Does it still know to stay divided? If you have 600 valve springs, is it safe to run a 595 cam? Yes. Also, I think testing diesel turbos on gas engines would get a lot of views. Yeah, I don't do stuff for views so much, but younger guys have tried it, but let them know if it will work. I think the only way that you get away with that is if you have 2 of those, but we can write that down. The problem is junkyard turbos are not really bargains anymore. Nitromethane. And I would say nitro goes along with like gas test anyways. because I want to test methanol too. Test a near empty nitrous bottle with a nano or push type system. What's nano? A near empty bottle, if it has low pressure, is just not going to supply as much nitrous. RB25 versus a gradient intake manifold. Yeah, we know what that's gonna. I know what's gonna happen there. Versus, I'm gonna put short runner Grady because we know what's gonna happen. Grady style. How about a test with an elbow style EFI intake, divided versus non-divided, 4150 flange? Are you still talking about the throttle body being divided? We're talking about exhaust stuff here, but what about a boosted big block forward? There you go. Boosted big block forward. And how about a boosted V6? 4.3 liter. And a cammed one and all that. Seems like my setup is lazy past 6,000, thinking the sloppy stage 3 would help. However, perhaps I've maxed out the eBay S475. Well, how much boost are you running? And how much time are you running? Are you trying to do this on pump gas? If you're trying to do it on pump gas, the laziness isn't the cam. Can we show the nitro in the oil helps build power so the nitro leaks through the rings in the combustion chamber? You want to put nitromethane in the oil? Test eBay twin HX35s. What do we get HX35s off of? Is that those are the diesel turbos, right? So that's the junkyard diesel turbo stuff. What percentage of nitro does the Omni need for 200 horsepower? You mean to make 200 horsepower or to add 200 horsepower? If you do oil pump mod on the Big Bang K, if it can make 700 at the wheels for a few dyno pulls and track runs, I'm betting you can get 850 to 900. Yeah, we haven't done any oil pump mods on it. I assume V8 turbo and keeping the banks divided, or 4 cylinders on each side of the housing. I think it could be beneficial. It could optimize and divide the exhaust pulses. There would be some benefit. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if the pulsing from 4 cylinders, and I need to go on the firing order and see how far away they are on each side, because it's not going to be even. I don't think. You'd be better probably to pair those differently, but you're going to have half on one side, half on the other. I just heard a lot of guys talking about being able to get large diesel turbos and wondered if they would work like big truck turbos or Cummins turbos, power strokes. I don't know what you mean by big turbos. Like none of the factory stuff, none of it like a Dodge Cummins, or none of those are going to be very big because they're not designed to make very much horsepower. They're low RPM and they're not, they're 350 or 400 horsepower or something. Honda V6 tests. Yeah, that would be good. We're going to do a lot of that with Jimmy's NSX. Can a GM 3.8 liter be stroked? I don't know. I won't ever do that. I won't do a stroker version of a 3800. Nitrous assisted nitrous oxide. It fills the bottle as the nitrous empties and keeps pressure constant. What does it fill it from? Another bottle? I have a compound like new off of a box truck cylinder. Is there a bigger turbo you're about to release at T4? It's a T4. It's also a V-band. You can get it either way. I think Saab has those. Nitromethane in the oil. I was listening to Cooper Baghetti podcast with John Sears, and they were talking about it. Yeah, if you can get the nitromethane up into the combustion chamber, I could see how it could be helpful. But the amount that you would get up in there from the past the ring package, it's not going to be very much. That might be something that guys tried to use. It sounds like a cheat that guys are using for qualifying or something. Get away, what's going on? Yes, on pump gas. Doesn't feel like it makes any more power after 12 pounds of boost. Ramp to 20 pounds of melt of the piston. How would I determine if I max out my turbo? You're not going to max out the turbo because you don't have any timing in this thing if you have pump gas in it. How much timing do you have at the top? Like 12 or 14 degrees or something? That's why you're not making any power at the top. If you put good gas in it and you put timing in it, it will keep making power. But when you start taking timing away, it takes all the power on the top away because it hurts the top way more than it does the middle or the bottom. Divided Summit log manifold versus undivided Amazon log manifold. What difference will it make? A divided Summit log manifold versus an undivided Amazon log manifold. A log manifold to feed what? What is it? Is it one side of a V8? Like what motor are you talking about? I'd like to see just how much power you can get from a 4.3 turbo. 3800 can be bored at 4200. Using stock manifolds for a 4.62 valve build using a T76. 85 stock engine, how much power should we be expecting to make and what should I be considering upgrading in the future? You should definitely be putting a ring gap in it. And you should be using an intercooler on it. We ran one of those T76s from CX Racing. It's not a very good turbo, so it's not going to make a lot of power. I think it's going to be like 700 or something is how much power that turbo will support. Nano system is a smaller piggyback bottle that uses the higher pressure nitrogen. Okay, I see. We know as the bottle pressure goes down and the fullness of the bottle goes down as you use up the nitrous, that when you activate it, it injects less nitrous for each hit. So it's going to make less power. And if you're still injecting the same amount of fuel, because you're injecting less nitrous, it's definitely going to get richer. 14.7 pounds of boost is roughly 2 times horsepower. It's not going to be that if you don't have the right amount of timing in it. It's not going to be that if you don't have the right air temperature. Like if you try to put 14.7 pounds of non-intercooled boost, and if you put 14.7 pounds of boost on a 300 horsepower motor, but instead of running the 22 degrees that's going to want to make power, you're only running 14 degrees, you're going to be off by like 100 horsepower or more. Scrolling. I meant 60 series Detroit turbos from Freightliners and Cats like Peter builds, but we don't have those in wrecking yards though. Buy the cheapest turbos online and see how long they last. Well, I have. I've bought DNA and CX Racing stuff, and we've run those a lot. And the ones that I've run have all worked fairly well. I don't think that they're great turbos, but they have so far seemed to last. Yeah, 14 degrees. Yeah, you're 7 or 8 degrees away from where it's going to want to make power. Big Bang Theory, a stock bottom end L8T. No, because it's a direct injected motor, so I'm probably not going to do that. The amount of work to get it to get the fuel to do that is not worth it. The guys at Brian Tooley have run one, but they didn't do a stock bottom end one. I think that they put rods and pistons and stuff in it. And other guys like Skog and Dickey have run those things up and made a lot of power with them. Could you spool a turbo quicker by having an air nozzle installed into the turbine housing, pointed at the turbine wheel? How effective would it be? The guys back at NOS and Kip Kington from Turbo Magazine, the guy that I wrote my first story for, tried to use nitrous to spool the turbo up, to aiming it at the impeller to try to get the impeller to spool up faster. But it's not very effective. It's not nearly as effective as just if you inject the nitrous into the motor after the turbo, and then you get to spool up really, really quick. But I don't know how quickly that does that, because I don't know if you spin the turbo up irrespective of the airflow, if that even does anything. About your low buck truck cam. There you go. LQ4, planning on a T6 S480. Would you recommend something different? Yeah, Ethan, how much power are you trying to make? Stock bottom end 305 with no extra ring gap can hold over 600 horsepower with a 250 shot of nitrous and only break a ringland on a 300 shot. I'm interested to see how much boost a 305 can handle. A 3.5 or 3.6 Dodge turbo buildup would be interesting. Good to hear it comes in V-band hot side. That seems way more convenient for packaging. It is kind of. I agree. The V-band's nice because then you can kind of rotate it and see see what's going on. That's one of the things I love about the Y pipe setup that we have that runs off of the stock exhaust manifolds is that it ends in the V-band. And so when we put the adapter on there, you could wiggle the turbo around to get it to fit the things that we need it to fit, with the configuration that we happen to run for this test with the intercooler and then aiming the exhaust, to get it, because where the turbo is, you want to get the exhaust past the spark plug wires and the coils and all that stuff. So you want to get it to, and it helps being able to spin that thing around. Junkyard diesel factory pickup turbos only range like 52 to 63 millimeters. Yeah. S3s, S4 turbos come on medium duty to heavy duty semis. Yeah, I haven't seen anything big on any of the factory trucks that we see in wrecking yards. So on a budget turbo setup with a distributor, you'd want to lock the distributor at 12 to 14 degrees from idle to wide open, no advance at all. Weld it to lock it. No, I don't recommend that at all. I don't know how you would do it on a distributor thing. Normally what we do is we have the distributor doing what the distributor does, and then we take timing away per pound of boost. So that you would do that. Like if you have a distributor curve that's let's say 30 degrees all in, wherever that's all in at, I would have on a distributor application, I would have a slower curve that might not have full timing until, let's say 4,000 RPM or 4,500 RPM, and it has less down low. And then we have boost retard knobs that take timing away per pound of boost. Because you might have 10 pounds. Let's say you made 10 pounds at 2,000 RPM. Well, you'd want both less initial timing because you don't need the same amount of timing at 2,000 RPM that you do at 4 or 5 or 6,000. So you need less there to start out with, even NA. And then if you had 10 pounds at 2,000, you'd also want to take a whole bunch of timing away in addition to it already being lower. So that's easy to do with fuel injection, but a little more complicated with a distributor. That's why it can be easier to not get that right with a distributor combination. Both for the LS combo, if I had a divided log or undivided for a single GT45, what would be the difference to spool or power? I don't know. I don't know how you're talking about the exhaust manifold itself being divided, because normally what you do is you run the exhaust from one side and the exhaust from the other side. Those merge together but stay divided, and then they go into a divided flange, and then that goes into a divided twin scroll housing where you have an opening on each side. And so all of that, the whole thing stays divided all the way. I don't know if what you're saying is that there's a divided manifold somehow. I don't know what you would do. Are you running two from that one side? I'm not getting that. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. I was thinking, would a hot V setup make a flathead run cooler? I don't know. Nano claims is consistent power for the entire run in the bottle. So if you can keep pressure, like if you think about this, if you have, let's say you have a sliding flat bottom on your nitrous bottle, and you fill that with pressurized air from the bottom so that you constantly have 1,000 pounds of nitrous pressure. You just have a smaller volume basically as you start running nitrous out of it. If you constantly have the same pressure, and you could do that, you would constantly have the same flow. But if they're doing that, if you constantly have the same pressure and you can have the same flow, then that could work. I don't know how they're pressurizing it, but that sort of setup could work. 14 degrees total timing with 15 psi and pump gas for safety. Okay, but 14 degrees at the torque peak and 14 degrees at the horsepower peak and 14 degrees at 3000 RPM are all different things. 2 of those are more than likely going to detonate, and 1 of them is not, or can, or not can, will be more likely to detonate. What's power capability response difference between the different price levels of turbos? Which turbos are you referring to? The turbos that we're going to sell, or are you referring to turbos like in general, just like out there in turbo land? A lot of big truck garages have good ones laying around they don't use anymore. Oh, on the diesel turbos. But the problem is that's not something that a guy can readily repeat. I mean, we're all not going to go find some free or next to free turbos laying around, but we can all get cheap turbos off of the internet, and we could all go over to a wrecking yard and get 2 Saab turbos or some kind of little turbos. But there just aren't really good turbos there at the yard for making, a kind of serious amount of power. A lot of big truck engines have good. Okay, I bet a ring gap 305 will make 800 to 1,000. That's a big spread between there, but I think I've never done that on a stock bottom end small block. You would use CO2 on the exhaust housing to spool the turbo. Why would you use CO2? You're going to cool the temperature. Well-metered water injection will help. I would imagine enough compressed air in a turbo would basically be compound turboing, just as naturally desperate car can be run on compressed air. Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to get very much air through a nozzle, and not relative to what a motor uses. For the poll question, is the housing on the turbo divided? Yeah, if you could see the thumbnail, you could see it has a divided exhaust housing, and it has a divided flange on the mount for the turbo. My phone froze yesterday when I sent a question last night. Just curious, would an L33 with AFR enforcer heads and truck plus cam and Trailblazer SS make to the crank? Yeah, I think you were asking if it was going to make 450, right? And yeah, it should certainly do that. Maybe a little more than that, because I just don't know what those heads will do. Truck plus LQ4 T6 S480. I want to go 8s in a Chevy Nova 2 is the goal. 1,000 horsepower. The S480 certainly will do 1,000 horsepower. The T6 is not going to be terribly responsive, but it will make enough power. So if you have enough converter in that stuff and gear, that you can do 1,000 horsepower. So if you can run 8s in that car with 1,000 horsepower, that combination can make 1,000 horsepower. Could you run a 274 cam and a roller 351 with stock pistons? I don't know. You have to measure it and see. I think you can, but I think it would depend on what head you're using. There's a ton of 305 hate. It would be cool to see an underdog make serious power. I have some 305 builds that we did. We certainly could get 400 horsepower out of a 305 NA. And so if it will handle the boost, because it has those. Does a 305 have thicker cylinder walls? Does anybody know? Has anybody ever done any? I've never seen any sonic checks or magging or anything of a 305 to know if the cylinders are any thicker than they are on a 350. The same people are throwing hate on a 305, praise a 302 Ford. Well, it's got a 4-inch bore. That's why. That's the only thing bad about the 305 is that there aren't as many head choices for it. But, boost. If your show could be done with 305 under boost, people will be sorry. Why would they be sorry? I don't understand what the issue is with a 305. If we can get a 305 to make 350, it's going to make 700 at 14, 14 and a half pounds. It will 100% do that. And then we just have to see at one point where something else gets bad. But I wouldn't put ARP anything in it other than head bolts or head studs. Not if we're going to do a stock bottom end. Got my 258 turbo mounted today. Needs piping. Go look up how long until it grenades on the turbo forums. What I meant on that compound turbo I have, I will gladly send it to you. If it's something you'd like to test and you use it to explain how compounds work. Only had a few miles on it and the truck got it. I appreciate it, Danny, but I've already run a compound turbo setup on the LS. My 305 has been boosted for 10 years now. Everybody told me just take that with you. Those running gates on the charge cold side and not on the hot side to regulate boost. I haven't ever tried that, so I don't know anything about that. Are you talking about blow-off valves, or are you talking about that they're now regulating the pressure of the turbo? I wouldn't think you'd want to regulate it on the cold side, because then it is going to definitely overspeed the turbo. 305 HO is my channel's background picture. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, there is a downside to 305. There's no doubt about it. It's not that it's bad or can't make any power. It makes what it makes. The problem is that the small bore, there's not a lot of people that make cylinder heads for it. There's a billion people that make 4-inch bore heads for small black Chevys, and even maybe a little bit smaller than that, but not for that 305. And so you have the trick flow heads basically, and I don't know how many of those they sell. I think Dart maybe makes something, but there's just not a lot of heads for them, and you need head flow to make power. Garden hose off. I 40 over a Junker 350. Shows a TPI and a pair of Grand National turbos and the bottle on it, and it went 9s. Single twin scroll manifold versus single scroll on a twin scroll turbo. Twin scroll manifold has 1 scroll per LS bank. Well, what is a twin scroll manifold? So explain that to me. It seems like the banks would have different back pressure or something. I know what a twin scroll manifold is on a 4-cylinder. That's a tri-Y header. I smell a 305 Big Bang. I listen for answers from the poll. I would want a Vortec 305 to do the Big Bang on. Better heads, powder metal rods, easier roller cam. I agree. I probably would do that with a what's the version of the Vortec 305? It's not an L31, right? What is the 305 one? It's not an L05, right? That's not a roller one. You ever had the C clips on wrist pins come out, causing catastrophic piston failure? I never have. I have an LS2 6-liter stroker, 3600 stall. Would you use a VS 7875 turbo or 80 for a street car? What power level do you want, and what are you using it for? Are you using wastegates on the cold side now? I think mostly a racing thing. I'd like to hear an explanation why they're thinking that that's better. The only benefit that I could see for that is that the turbo may stay spooled up in between shifts or something. Another interesting video would be notching 305 bores and using 4-inch heads if that's possible. I think it would be like they did that on the big block stuff, because they use the same heads on the 396 motors. And so they did notch the side of the bore. And so that certainly is possible. LO5 is a TBI. The L30. Yeah, what is the let's see. L30, yeah, and L31 is the 5.7. Okay, that's right. I believe Brett with the Snot Rocket is doing this, bypassing boost with a drive-by-wire throttle bite. I think that would be hard on the turbos. Spools faster while on the two-step. Okay, yeah, I would think that it would be twin scroll exhaust manifold is divided, so the firing order goes back and forth between each side of the divided flange on the turbo. Pontiac 350s have notch bores too. A few sets of 350 Pontiac gaskets. They don't make them anymore. Just 455s. What did the difference between the divided end up being, and what did it mean? We didn't test it. The question wasn't that. Look at the poll. The question, the discussion was, does it matter? And it only matters in really one situation. How much torque at the wheel is logical for a B6 turbo engine with a 79 millimeter bore? What is a B6 engine? Isn't a cool side wastegate more efficient in boost control based off of spring pressure? I don't see how it would be. They have to be doing it like we talked about. They have to be doing it for something specific. It has to be. Somebody mentioned about the initial spool up, like on a two-step, that it would be better because you're can put more speed in the turbo, or that you don't lose boost on the shifts. I'd really be interested in seeing you test one of the supposed to be good electric turbos. I don't know what how are they driving that? Like what? That's got to be a complicated drive setup. Summit Racing Proless turbo manifolds. I think that there's a language barrier here. Oh, so I see what the issue here is. So you're talking about a divided manifold for a twin turbo setup. So where they mount the turbo to the manifold. That's the one you're talking about, right? So that's different. That whole manifold, two is feeding one and two is feeding the other. And then you put a divided or a twin scroll turbo on top of that. What I was talking about is the manifolds both coming together and feeding a single turbo. That's what I didn't understand, because that's not what that manifold's for. But yeah, I see what you're talking about. That's just a divided manifold feeding a turbo. So then you don't have four feeding one side. Now you have two feeding one side. I don't know what that's going to be. I wouldn't ever have made a manifold like that. I don't know why they did that. Mazda V6 is a 4-cylinder for Miatas. Yeah, I'm just not familiar with that designation. I've built a lot of Mazda stuff, Miata stuff, but I'm not familiar with that designation. I have LS2 6-liter stroker. Okay, let's see. We did this. Junior, that turbo is not going to work nearly as well as the turbo that we'll have on Monday. The turbo that we'll have on Monday will make more power and be more responsive than that. And it's available in a T4 or a V-band flange. think the 307 gets more undue respect than the 305. I think it should be better, and you should do a three-way shootout, a 302, 305, 307. I've already done a 302, a Ford versus a 305 Chevy, but a 305 Chevy and a 307 Chevy would be interesting. What we're going to see is if the compression is the same and the camshaft is the same, that they're going to make the same power. Twin scroll on a V8 is inefficient because of cross plane exhaust pulses. If it was flat plane, it would work better. Or run twin scrolls on a flat plane. I would think the electric turbos would just have to work off of a 12-volt system. I don't think a 12-volt is going to be able to spin a. They have to spice that thing up a lot. It's possible to shim rods and engines to separate the millimeters or two, and then put sleeves and reposition to allow bigger bore and a force on. I don't know what you mean by shimming rods. Let's see, how much torque at the wheels is logical for a V6 turbo engine? So it's an 80 millimeter, 80 by 84. So that's less than 2 liters. I think on the Honda, how much boost are you running? If you tell me that, I can give you an idea. Because I've run a lot of 4-cylinder Honda stuff. That motor is not going to be as good as a Honda, but at least I could give you an idea. If you tell me how much boost you're running, I could tell you what it'll make. And it'd be good if you told me if you were running cams or if you were running stock intake manifolds or what you're doing there. I'm still thinking about building a Ford 300. We did one with an Aussie intake and fuel injection. Exhaust manifold stepped up to 2.5. Gains from valve size and compression. Any increase in pulsation perceived at a turbine will make it spool at a lower RPM exhaust energy. I don't know what your definition of pulsation perceived at a turbine. So if you have two, like on that one for the Summit, you have 2 of the cylinders feeding one side of this divided housing and 2 feeding the other side of the divided housing. So you're saying that that's going to spool the turbo better than having all 4 feed one? Or what if we mixed and matched the 2 cylinders that are feeding it so that we have different, time distances between these pulses? That's going to change it too with the same amount of exhaust flow? If I had a 307, laughably, the first thing I'd do is stick 305 heads on it. Yeah, the 307s, did they ever get good cylinder heads? They never would have got any sort of Vortec head on it. So my understanding, I'm a blower guy, but the cold side wastegate is more efficient in directly controlling boost pressure rather than by the impeller speed. Only really for big turbo drag cars. I could see how you would have better response rate in changing the boost, because by changing it on the hot side, you're having to change the hot side first before it changes the cold side. So I could see how that would be more responsive, but I just think that would be bad for the turbo though. I love internal combustion engines. Do you have any videos on variable vane turbos? The only variable vane turbos I've ever run, and they've all been on the chassis dyno, have all been like factory stuff. Trying to max it out as ported polished cylinder head. It will be twin charge setup. Might even try for a patent on my layout. Is it, when you say it's twin charge, does it have some sort of like positive displacement supercharger on it as well? That sort of thing has been done a lot. Well, knife edging the divider of the twin scroll benefit. Yeah, we talked about that. It could, if it improves flow. If you have an open flange feeding a divided housing and you knife edge that, that's what we talked about earlier, that you could improve flow into that. You also might get a really hot spot there that will cause a problem. But off-topic question, starting my first budget turbo build on an LM7. I'm planning to get out the rings. My question is, do you reuse the factory rod bolts and bearings on your test engines? Yes, every one of the big bang ones, every one of the junkyard motors that we run, that we change ring gap on, we reuse all of that stuff. Yes, without a doubt, more pulsations accelerate turbine more quickly. More pulsations. To me, I'm thinking when you say that's 8 cylinders instead of 4 cylinders feeding it. There would be more, right? Is that what you're saying? Because that's just going to be more exhaust energy. I'd like to see the 300 Ford also built in turbo, maybe even a reground cam. They're already torque monsters. I think it would be a beast of a pulling engine. Also has H-beam rods, no cams, and a great forged piston and billet oil pump. But are you going to put stock cams in there, or are you running some sort of, because a stock cam is really going to hurt the power if you don't have cams in there. Positive displacement, supercharger, and a turbo. Okay, the supercharger is going to kind of be in the way. But I can tell you that when we did the Honda stuff, and I don't know how much power you're trying to make, but with a, we did 730 with a 2-liter B series. That was with a 76 millimeter turbo. We did 550 or something with a B16, but that wasn't really maxed out. That was before we hurt the, that was a stock bottom end deal. Let's see, Honda. And I'll tell you where the torque was on that stuff. Yeah, not that one. Tile. Trying to find it. I got so many Honda things there. Dyno Day. 2-liter turbo. Okay, that one had 500 foot-pounds of torque at 728. That's pretty high, though. This one was making power past, little past 8,000. Peak torque was at 7,300 or 7,400. Yours not going to be that high. My 66 had a 306 in it, but warranted out for a 327 short block. Supposedly only got 10 miles on the block before it was parked. BorgWarner engineer I talked to said divided exhaust path to bifurcated turbine housing increases turbine efficiency at lower RPM. From what I remember, all 307 heads were 70 to 76 cc's, which is big. Yeah, those are, nobody likes those heads. I said maybe I'll patent it. Okay, no, that's good. If you got something cool and neat, you should. I've always went with an open T4 7875 and not divided on basic on3 turbo. Can't find good cams. I'm in Iran. Live life on the veterans level. Does anybody know who has Miata cams? Does Brian Crowder or any of those guys? I don't know who makes those. I don't know who makes the Miata cams. Does Webb or any of those guys have them? The open T4 is better used with a base kit. Detroit Diesel did its 4-cylinder manifold to crowd cylinders 1 and 2, firing 3 and 4 together. I had a twin scroll on my 7 MGTE, and 100 RPM scroll difference wasn't worth the back pressure difference. I would like to see that. I'd like to see testing specifically on that. What I suspect, having done my fair share of turbo testing, that it would come down to if you wanted to science that out and make it better somewhere, I don't see how there's not going to be a trade-off somewhere else. But it'd be cool. 67 out of 307 it. I'm very satisfied with 500 torque. Yeah, this is 500 foot-pounds of torque. What's the best way for me to make money hawking junkyard parts on eBay? You want to do that? That's a tough gig. I went and looked at my Le Mans where I'm storing it. Utterly sad. I got to yank it out of the field. Team, I'm taking the wrong cam shirt to Japan. All right. I want to see a picture of you. Make sure you send me a picture. When does a divided give a better result over an open T4 and something like a 7875? I couldn't be here on earlier. I don't know that it would. I don't know that it would. Not even researched it. Maybe a custom grind cam. It probably will have to be. It probably will have to be a regrind. I'm thinking. Although, given the number of Miatas out there, there's a million Miatas out there racing all the time. So somebody has to make cams for them. He's going to Japan. Uh-oh, he's going to override some parts. Man, Hector, why are you doing me like that? Is there really much of a benefit in 4.7 firing order on a small block Chevy? We haven't seen it. The guys at West Tech and Engine Masters tested it, and they didn't see anything. They tested it. I think they've tested it both on a small block and a big block, and I don't think it did anything. If all you're changing is the firing order, I don't think that there was a power change. Keep twin scrolls to 4 cylinders. When I've been running them, I just didn't care. We just put the turbo on and just ran the turbo. I didn't care that it was divided or non-divided. We just ran it. Bullet cams is Mississippi will custom grind you a cam, but boy, they want a lot of information. Yeah, but I don't. Bullet cam does a lot of good stuff. I've used their stuff before. I don't know if they're in the Miata market though. We got 1 more minute. How's our poll doing? Doesn't matter that the T6 flange is divided when running a divided exhaust housing. Yeah, we talked about that. Webcam does stuff. Schneider cams does stuff. And as far as regrinding, and they might have stuff there. I don't know. But somebody's got to have like shelf Miata cams. Now it makes me want to go look it up. Any circumstances where upgrade coils work better than GM on a turbo setup? Oh no, I haven't seen that. Like I said, if you're doing 2000 stuff, then yeah, you got to go look at coils. But for 1500, like we did with the LS3 coils, I don't know that you need to ever do anything more than that. That's assuming that you can control the dwell. If you can't control the dwell and you don't have like 18 or 19 thousandths plug gap, you could have problems. And in that instance, if you got misfire and you put some sort of hotter coil in it, I don't know. I'd like to see that that's the case. And you cured the misfire, then yes. But otherwise, if you do what we did, I don't think that that's going to be a problem. Delta, that's right. Delta has cams for them too. That's right. Is Delta the guys in Oregon? Oregon. I went to the Oregon Caves before. It's pretty cool. I went there as a kid. It was a long time ago. Upgraded plug wires. All of the things that we've run have all been junkyard factory plug wires. I've never bought a new set of plug wires. The only time I have new plug wires is when somebody sent me a set with the ceramic boots on them. I already broke one of them. I think I'm going to get a PT 5858 T3 for the D16. Okay. Looks like a good time for 500 at the wheel. Okay. I can control dual timing. Oh, dual timing. That's 2 cams. Some of mine broke when twisting. The factory plug wires, like on my truck, because I don't know that they'd ever been taken off because they seem like that they were solid on there. So you got to be really careful taking them off. Reminds me of Oregon Trail computer. Is it recommended to side gap the plugs for what application? Coyote just passed my porch. He didn't want pets. We've seen a few coyotes. I haven't seen them walking around the neighborhood. I see them down at West Tech all the time when because I'm driving there late. I'm driving around late at night because I always leave at midnight or something when I'm testing. And when I drive through the industrial area, I see coyotes there a lot, just roaming the streets, probably for all the rabbits and stuff that are in the bushes. Favorite spark plug for boosted 5.3s, something cold. Whatever they have is cold, the NGK stuff, or we run Denso Iridium stuff because they have that there. A ton of coyotes. Yeah, we have coyotes up where we walk the dogs too. That's right. They're just trying to make a living, man. And they've adapted to the industrial neighborhood too. Because the other thing when I go out, like if I go out and run and stuff when I'm there, I'll go out when it's usually still light, but sometimes maybe just getting dark. You'll see a bunch of the little bunny rabbits are sitting out because there's bushes all around there, and then they're just sitting right outside, and then they just, like in the hedges, and they just run into the hedges. I know the coyotes got to be getting those. Looking for roadrunners. That's right. Yeah, Jet. We go colder than that, but I'll put 9s or 10s in them. We only have dingoes. Yeah, that's serious stuff. Lots of skunks. Yeah, we have skunks there and possums. Lizards, all kinds of stuff. They'd have birds fly into the shop a few times too. And had more cougars. the good kind or the good kind? On that note, it is time to go, but I will be back tomorrow.